All right, so we're diving into the story of Joseph.
Yeah.
Prisoner to prince, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's how that YouTube video by Grace Digital Network puts it.
Yeah, it's a pretty dramatic story, right?
You shared some excerpts with me. Seems like it's going to be a wild ride. We've got family drama, betrayal, prison, and he ends up with a super powerful position in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, it's got it all. But it's more than just like a soap opera, you know?
Right. I'm curious, like, what makes it so interesting? You know, this story's been around for thousands of years, so there's got to be something there.
Oh, absolutely. Like on the surface, you have all these events, but underneath there are these deeper themes like faith, grace, the power of interpretation. And those are things we still think about today, right?
Yeah, totally. And right from the beginning, it's clear that Joseph is like the favorite.
Yeah.
His father, Jacob, even gives him this super fancy coat, a multicolored tunic.
Oh, yeah. That did not go over well with his brothers.
I bet. Talk about sibling rivalry.
Right. And it says in the text, this favoritism, it really caused a lot of tension. It's interesting, though, Joseph doesn't come across as, like, spoiled, even though his dad's doting on him.
Yeah, he's still pretty young at this point, right?
He's only 17, tending sheep with his brothers.
Doing the work?
Yeah, exactly. But he also tells on them, like he goes back to his dad and reports on their bad behavior.
Ooh, sneaky. So you can see how the resentment's building, even before anything major happens.
For sure. And then things get even weirder. Joseph starts having these dreams.
Yeah, those crazy dreams. I mean, talk about out there, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars all bowing down to him. Even I think that's a little much.
Right. But we have to remember, back then, dreams were a really big deal. People saw them as prophecy, divine communication. They weren't just random thoughts. So when Joseph has these dreams, it freaks his brothers out.
They probably thought he was getting a little too big for his britches.
Exactly. And even Jacob, his own father, he gets kind of worried, you know? Rebukes Joseph for talking about the dreams. It's like even he's skeptical.
It's interesting. Right from the start, you see how people are interpreting things so differently. And it causes real problems. You know, it's not just abstract.
Oh, for sure. This whole idea of interpretation, like how we make sense of things, is huge in Joseph's story. It can be used to build people up or to tear them down. But there's something else at play, too, this idea of grace, which the video really focuses on.
Yeah, even when things go bad for Joseph, he keeps seeing God's hand in it all.
Right, like it's all part of a plan.
So like with Potiphar's wife, you know, he's a slave at this point, basically. But he works his way up. Becomes really important in Potiphar's house.
Potiphar trusts him completely. Like Joseph's in charge of everything.
And then this temptation comes along. Like it would have been so easy for him to give in. He's in a tough situation.
But he doesn't, though. The video even quotes from Philippians,
Oh, yeah.
Philippians 2, I think, verses 12 to 16, to show how dedicated Joseph is to God.
So he chooses to do the right thing, but it backfires, of course.
Oh, big time. Potiphar's wife, she makes up the story, accuses him, and Joseph ends up in prison.
Brutal. It seems like the worst possible outcome. But even then, he doesn't lose his faith.
He's incredibly resilient, and you kind of wonder, is it just blind faith, or is it more about making tough choices, you know, even when it's hard?
Right. Like, is there something more active going on? He's not just passively accepting whatever happens.
That's a really good question, and I think it's something the video doesn't quite answer. It focuses more on the divine intervention, the miracles. But what about Joseph's own personality, his strength, his integrity, all that? Didn't that play a role?
Yeah, so maybe it's not just one or the other, you know? It's both. Divine grace and human action working together.
I think so, yeah. Like, even in the midst of all this stuff, we still have choices, and those choices matter.
For sure. And even in prison, Joseph manages to thrive.
Yeah, he earns the warden's trust. Becomes responsible for all the prisoners. It's almost like he's being prepared for something.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And of course, this is where his talent for interpreting dreams, it really comes out, foreshadowing what's going to happen later.
And it all starts with those two guys, the cupbearer and the baker.
Yeah.
Like a little side story, but super important.
Yeah. Their dreams, they're not as crazy as Joseph's. Like, one is about a vine with 3 branches, the other one, 3 baskets of bread. But they still have this big meaning.
And Joseph gets them right, of course.
He predicts the cupbearer will get his job back, and the baker, well, he's not so lucky.
It's kind of crazy that even in prison, Joseph's showing leadership skills.
Yeah, he's taking responsibility, making these tough calls, and it proves he can interpret these symbolic messages, you know? Which
leads directly to Pharaoh and those famous dreams about the cows and the grain. But I guess we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Right, stay tuned.
Okay, so last time we were talking about Joseph in prison, figuring out those dreams for the cupbearer and baker. And that leads to Pharaoh, right? He has these crazy dreams that nobody else can figure out.
Yeah, those dreams, they really freaked Pharaoh out. Like, imagine 7 healthy cows just getting eaten by 7 skinny, gross cows.
That's pretty disturbing.
And then in another dream, 7 good ears of grain just devoured by 7 thin, withered ones. I mean, those are some powerful images.
No kidding. And nobody in his whole court could tell him what they meant.
Nope. But then the cupbearer, the one Joseph helped back in prison, he remembers him and tells Pharaoh, hey, this guy, he might be able to help.
So that one good deed way back when, it comes back around.
Exactly. It shows how these little things can have huge consequences, you know? Like, even in prison, Joseph was making a difference.
So they bring Joseph to Pharaoh, and I guess he's not afraid to speak his mind, even though he's still a prisoner?
No, he tells it straight. Says, God is showing you what he's about to do. 7 years of plenty, he says, and then 7 years of famine.
Wow, that's a bold prediction. I mean, to say that to the most powerful guy in Egypt.
It takes a lot of courage. But I think Joseph really believed he was speaking for God. You know, like he was just a messenger.
Right. And he doesn't stop there. He actually gives Pharaoh a plan, right? To prepare for the famine.
Yeah, he's not just an interpreter. He's thinking strategically. Says, pick some wise guys to oversee things. Store up grain during the good years. Basically, create a national food bank, you know?
So he's not just predicting the future. He's trying to change it.
Exactly. And Pharaoh, he gets it. He sees that Joseph is smart. He's got this insight. And boom, promotes him to governor right there on the spot.
Just like that. Prisoner to prince.
Yeah, the video's title isn't exaggerating. It's crazy. But even Pharaoh sees that there's something special about Joseph.
Yeah, he says something like, can we find another guy like this with the Spirit of God in him?
That's the thing. Even Pharaoh, this powerful ruler, he recognizes the divine. You know, he humbles himself.
So Joseph takes charge, sets everything up to store the grain. And then, boom, famine hits. Not just Egypt, but all the surrounding countries, too.
It's a bad situation. But they all know Egypt's the place to go because Joseph was prepared.
And then, who shows up? None other than his brothers, right? Looking for food.
Can you imagine that? They have no clue who he is, but he recognizes them.
Talk about a family reunion.
This is where it gets really interesting. I mean, Joseph, he could have gotten revenge. They sold him into slavery, right? He had every right to be angry.
Totally. But instead, he tests them. He wants to know if they've changed, you know?
Right.
Like, are they sorry for what they did?
It makes you think about forgiveness. Is it just forgetting? Or does there have to be some kind of, like, recognition, real change?
That's deep. And Joseph, he doesn't just forgive them right away. He puts them through these trials, watches how they behave.
He wants to see their hearts, you know, make sure it's real.
And finally, he reveals himself. I am Joseph, your brother. I bet that was an intense moment.
Oh, yeah. All that guilt coming back. But then Joseph says something amazing. He says, don't be distressed. God sent me here ahead of you to preserve life.
He's not just forgiving them. He's saying it was all part of a plan, even the bad stuff.
It's incredible, right? Like, their betrayal, it actually saved people in the end. God was working through it all.
That's powerful. That idea that even when things are tough, there might be a bigger purpose, something we don't understand yet.
That's a good place to stop for now, I think. We'll pick it up next time.
So Joseph forgives his brothers, brings the whole family to Egypt.
Yeah, they get to live in Goshen, this nice, fertile area. They're safe, you know, during the famine.
Happy ending. It's kind of interesting how that ties back to those early dreams.
Oh, right. The sun, moon, and stars.
His family. They all come and bow down to him.
Not because he's forcing them to.
Right, it's out of respect. Because he saved them. So the prophecy comes true, just not in the way anyone expected.
It's like sometimes your path to, like, fulfilling your purpose, it's not straightforward.
It's messy.
Lots of twists and turns. And in Joseph's case, all those challenges, it's like they made him stronger, prepared him to be a leader.
It's a pretty timeless story, don't you think?
I know.
It still speaks to people, even now.
Yeah, I think so. It's about betrayal, resilience, ambition, and in the end, it's about redemption, you know, turning bad things into good things.
And finding meaning, even when things are hard.
Exactly. It also shows how complicated family can be, right? All that jealousy and backstabbing at first, but then they come together.
It's powerful stuff. The video really emphasizes that divine grace, though. It makes you wonder how much control we really have. Like, is it fate or free will?
That's the big question, isn't it? But the video does say that Joseph had good qualities, too. He made good choices along the way. It wasn't just luck.
So maybe it's a bit of both.
Right. Like, you have to believe in something bigger than yourself, but you still have to make the effort, make the right choices.
Joseph's story makes me think about, like, what helps us through tough times? What gives us hope? What do we believe in?
It's personal, right? But it's important to think about.
Joseph's story is kind of an invitation, I think, to look at our own lives.
Think about our dreams, our challenges, how we interpret things that happen to us. It's been a good deep dive.
Yeah, definitely. Lots to think about. So, for everyone listening out there, what do you think? What sticks with you from Joseph's story?
What did you learn? Keep diving deep, everyone, and we'll see you next time.